Zero. So Liz, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And it is a real honor to be here today. And actually, it was really fun for you to say what the years were that I graduated, because sometimes because I ended up staying here, I forget that I'm an alumni as well. So really nice to see you. I noted a few familiar faces, so hello to the people who've joined who I know, and welcome to those who I don't. I am primarily today going to speak in my role as a principal investigator, and actually as of July, one of the co-directors of Project Zero, a research center here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I do actually have a joint appointment on the faculty, and I teach courses on qualitative research methods and designing intercultural learning experiences. So if you have a burning question on anything to do with that, I'm happy to answer as well. But I thought, as a loose structure, just for today, I'd say a bit about Project Zero, or PZ as it's affectionately known, why I love working at Project Zero, and then I'll dig into two main strands of work that I've had going on here. One's broadly about intercultural learning, and the other is about powerful teacher professional development. But I'm going to try and contextualize that work so you can see that nothing that I do is kind of like a solo operation. It's very much influenced and informed by being part of the community that is Project Zero. So with that, I have prepared some slides, so I'm going to now attempt to share my screen. And I know some people here are very familiar with Project Zero, but for those who don't know, we have been around at HGSE since 1967. And actually, that is quite incredible in and of itself. It's really unusual for a research center that is entirely dependent on grants and soft funding to survive for so long. I think it's a testimony to some of the incredible researchers we've had, but also the really powerful and important community we've built, both within our research center here on APN Way, but beyond, out into the world. Now, can't go much further without saying, why is it called Project Zero? And I actually have written down the quote here. So the center was founded as a very small undertaking in 1967 by the philosopher Nelson Goodman, who had some funding to research arts and education and the role of cognition in the arts. And he said, in a very whimsical way, the state of general communicable knowledge about arts education is zero. We're starting at zero, so we are Project Zero. Which is kind of a nice story, but as time has evolved and the whole enterprise has become so much more than about one specific focus, involves many more researchers, we end up having to explain why a research center, which currently has 28 different projects, not all of which are to do with the arts, is called Project Zero. But there you have it, and it's something that we have to continually explain. We have very varied projects. So I've just listed some on the slide here. Some are related to the arts still: thinking, learning, understanding, creativity, ethics, civics, global and intercultural understanding, science learning, digital thriving, and much more. So we'll dig in a bit to what binds us together and what that means momentarily. But for those of you who have fond memories of APN Way, we are located on the 4th floor, which may or may not have existed when you were here. Basically, the roof of Longfellow was renovated probably about 10 years ago now, and we have a kind of quite a funky space up there on the floor. So that's where we are. At various points in our history, though, we've been dotted all over the place in the Harvard Square area, but we're very happy to be on campus. Right. In terms of the some actual projects that are going on right now and are current, Geordie, my colleague, who is here in the audience, is very kindly going to be popping some links in the chat as I speak, just in case you want to walk away with some resources or have points of reference. So what I'm about to share now, you can find all our current projects and some past projects on the PZ website that Geordie will put in the chat. But just to give you a sense of some of our current work, we have a new Centre for Digital Thriving that's officially launching next week with the Surgeon General and an Asquith forum here at HGSE. That's really digging into mental health and the use of social media and how we can help young people and not so young people thrive in a media-saturated, technology-filled world. We have Envisaging Innovation in Education, which is happening in Hong Kong with our colleague Edward Clapp, that's really looking system-wide about how education could become more innovative. Global Children's a project by Veronica Boix-Mancia that involves interactions between preschool and very young children in Japan and the US and builds on Veronica's global competence framework. The Good Project is a kind of panoply of smaller projects that's been going on for at least 20 years, led by Howard Gardner, who was one of the really driving forces in establishing Project Zero as a center, along with her, David Perkins. They're really looking at how work in multiple contexts can be excellent, engaging, and ethical. We have a brand new project called Hip Hop X. This is building on the work of former lecturer Aisha Upchurch, which is bringing her project and documenting the incredible learning that's been happening in the Hip Hop X conference that she's been running for 8 years, and that really promotes intergenerational conversations about hip hop. Leading Learning That Matters is one of several projects that Flossie Trout and Dave Perkins are running. Work is primarily in Australia. This one is working with school principals and other school leaders to really focus on what young people need to learn to help them thrive in the 21st century and beyond. Lila is the Learning Innovations Laboratory. This is working with many different organizations and companies, trying to kind of get a grip on what are some of the challenges that organizations face as they seek to become learning organizations and to stay relevant in today's landscape. And then finally, I've just mentioned the Next Level Lab run by Tina Grotzer. This brings together expertise in cognitive science, neuroscience, learning sciences, and innovative learning design and technology to address emerging and urgent issues in K-12 and the workforce. So you can see there's a lot going on at Project Zero, and that's just to name some of what's going on. None of these are the ones that I'm personally involved in. But you may be asking, well, you know, there's so much going on. What binds Project Zero together? We are a loose organization, and honestly, projects run pretty much autonomously. If I had to say in one sentence what Project Zero is, I would say that we research and promote learning, creativity, and human flourishing across an array of domains, age groups, and contexts. And then some bullets here of things that I think, you know, pop out to me as things that we have in common. We generally take a very learner-centered constructivist approach to education. So it's very active learning. You don't really see us delving into work that involves psychometric testing, for example. We really enjoy collaborating with practitioners and youth. We love to develop practical resources, tools, or frameworks, some of which will be popping up in the chat. We do a lot of work in international contexts, partly because those opportunities come to us and partly because we have established some skills in that domain. And then we have a very active professional development component. Partly this is how we raise funds, but it also blurs the line between us offering teacher professional development, learning from teachers out in the world, and then doing research that's tied to that. I just wanted to give you a flavor. This is what PZ kind of conferencing or PD can look like. It has a bit of an arts flavor to it and is active. These are scenes from our annual conference that takes place every year, Project Zero Classroom. And here are some snapshots of the home base up on the 4th floor. I want to give a shout out to Daniel Wilson, our former director, who was really an expert on how space can influence learning and vice versa. And his hand is very much in our really nice learning space that's kind of, I would say, cozier and funner than some of the other spaces on Appian Way. On the right there, you have something we call the Sizer, after our hero, Theodore Sizer. And this is a really comfortable room that's been created post-pandemic for informal meeting places. And here you have our kitchen and conferencing rooms. It's a little bit of a stage photo, but we do like to meet and kind of work collaboratively. And on the note of directors, I said we're unusual because we're kind of so old for a research center. I'll also note that all the living former directors of Project Zero, which is everybody minus Nelson Goodman, still actively work at Project Zero and have research going on here. And that speaks to the pull and power of Project Zero as a learning community. People don't just work here and then move on to other things. It's kind of like a family or a community where you kind of remain engaged moving forward. Right, I'll just say a little bit about why I love working at Project Zero, and then we'll pause for any questions that might be in the chat about Project Zero specifically, which I will do my best to answer. So I personally, and I'd mentioned I teach qualitative research methods. I love doing the kind of research that's exploratory, involves talking and observing people. And I love imagining what could be in education. I find this a really fun, positive, hope-inspiring kind of environment to work in, and really working with teachers to think what is possible, what do we need to be doing? And this work, and I didn't mention, I started my career as a teacher. So I was a history teacher, both in the UK and Australia before I found myself working at Project Zero. We're really doing work that's really on the cusp or at the nexus of practice and research. And I personally, as well as many of my colleagues, love to do collaborative design-based research, which really means we're working on a day-to-day basis with teachers and students. I love doing intercultural and international work, and Project Zero really allows for that to happen. I love the collegial and supportive environment where we're really working together. I have freedom to pursue the projects I want, assuming we can find the funding for it. And I think you'll see with the work that I share that serendipity has quite a large role to play in the work that I do. And I like being part of something that's bigger than myself. There's really a sense that whatever we do here, we're building on decades of amazing work that others have done under the umbrella of Project Zero. And then it goes without saying that Project Zero is at HGSE, which is another and bigger community that I'm very fond of and very proud to be a part of. And actually getting to interact with the incredible students we have, and of which presumably you were once part of, is a real bonus of working at Project Zero. And many students work as research assistants. I'll also give a shout out to our new PhD fellows program that we started this fall, and we have 4 incredible PhD students who have come and joined our community and are explicitly making connections to our work. So I will pause there before I delve into what am I specifically doing. I'll have any questions come up, Lisa, because I can't see it in my because I'm presenting my slides at the moment.
I don't see any specific questions in the chat yet, just some folks that have been adding some things that they're working on. Indy said, I agree with you, Liz. Daniel and other PZ staff/researchers have developed PZ offices to offer a model for engaging environments that support collaboration and ongoing learning.
Thank you, Indy, and hello.
But yes, if anybody does have any specific PZ questions, you're welcome to share them now. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next part of our presentation.
All right. So obviously things may bubble up, and I'm very happy to go more into conversation mode at the end of this. All right. Whoops, hang on. Something's gone a bit awry here. There we are. All right, so the first strand of work that I'm going to talk about could be characterized as intercultural learning. And I'm going to talk specifically about a project that is now 10 years old and which I co-direct with Carrie James and Shari Tishman. Until about now, this project has been known as Out of Eden Learn, but we're currently transitioning to a new name called the Open Canopy. Geordie will put the website for Out of Eden Learn in the chat, and I'll just note, I'll give some more specific resources momentarily, but the picture you see there is our custom-built website, and on that we have a lot of resources if you look at the menu at the top. In a nutshell, it's an online intercultural learning platform where young people aged from 3 up to 18 can engage in what we call learning journeys. We kind of group students together. It's free of charge. We have various curriculum, and we really encourage young people to engage in thoughtful intercultural interactions with one another. So this is the thing. I will back up a minute. You may be wondering, why was it ever called Out of Eden Learn? So I'll just give you the backstory here. And I think it speaks to the serendipity and kind of out of the box projects that can really exist here at Project Zero. So the person you see there, his name is Paul Salopek. He is currently embarked and has been since 2013 on a slow walk around the world. Some of you may, if you're US based, he's quite a regular contributor on NPR. He's written in New York Times, New Yorker, but he primarily writes for the National Geographic. And he was here on a fellowship at Harvard in 2012 to plan his walk and experiment in slow journalism. And he reached out, I guess he'd heard of Project Zero, to see if we had any interest in being educational partners with him. I was just finishing my doctorate here at the Ed School at that time, which had been on exploring young people's historical consciousness, how they relate their own lives to the past. And I was really interested when I met him about the historical layers to his walk. He's broadly following the migratory pathways of our human ancestors. And with other colleagues, Shari Tishman is like an expert on slow looking, so was very intrigued by the slowing down aspect of his walk. Carrie James has for many years now been an expert on kids' digital lives and how we can create safe and productive spaces online. And between us, we kind of came up with an experimental companion like learning experience that would go with the walk. But if we cue forward, we are still very much in touch with Paul Salopek. He's currently in China. He's done some beautiful reporting. And actually, Geordie, if you could put in the chat the link to the National Geographic website where you can see his writing, his multimedia, etc. We have so outgrown the idea of us being an experimental learning community to go with a walk, hence the kind of us rebranding. And actually coming soon, but unfortunately I don't have the link right now because we're still finalizing the text. We have a free ebook coming very soon, which distills the pedagogy that we've developed, what we now call the Open Canopy. And the basic principles are getting young people to slow down, to observe the world carefully and listen attentively to one another, sharing stories and perspectives with other young people. We've created a platform where kids who wouldn't ordinarily encounter one another from different geographic locations or different socioeconomic backgrounds, rural, urban, suburban, we deliberately mix it up, but this can all be done within a single classroom. Making connections both among young people as whole human beings, but also between individual young people, their own lives and bigger human stories or unfolding forces or structures that are out in the world. And then kind of 4 and 5, I've separated out, but underpinning all of this, we really believe in the importance of creating opportunities for learner-generated content where young people can pick what's relevant and important to them and their communities and share it with other youth. And then really fostering conditions for thoughtful peer exchange, as I said, where young people can bring their whole selves to the classroom. So this is something we're excited about. And just to say, the Open Canopy, as a new name, it's supposed to convey kind of a protective space. On our platform, for example, kids don't share their photographs or real names. And we have created guidelines and a dialogue toolkit to foster thoughtful interactions. But a canopy also connotes connectedness, and nurturing, and kind of growing together. And open is because open canopies allow for shafts of light, for greater biodiversity, and you'll see the different colors there of the network. You know, there's a real power to be had by putting people's different perspectives in communication with one another. 2 resources that Geordie's just going to put in the chat for you, which I'm happy to talk about later. The first is the dialogue toolkit, which has been really a popular kind of product from our work over the last 10 years. Teachers often use this in the classroom, even though it was designed to be used online. And these are like just gentle moves that can help young people to get beyond just like a thumbs up, a like, awesome, you know, not very meaty conversations in an online forum, and which have also proved beneficial for in-class discussion. And then the other tool is something we call the 3 O's. This arose from really examining closely what students were doing in the online space we'd created for them. And then occasionally, it was very mild, I might say, but there was sometimes we were seeing things that weren't quite in the spirit of what we'd been hoping for. And we came to call these the 3 O's, being a little bit overconfident that you knew a lot about the cultures that you were encountering maybe for the first time, overgeneralizing based on an interaction with just 1, 2, or 3 students from one particular country, and then othering, which can be subtle, but kind of an implication that other people either in the platform or maybe written about by Paul Salopek or others, quite on the same level as yourself. And then we've kind of come up with the 3 O's as a useful tool, as a kind of a preemptive thing that teachers can do to help young people be mindful as they're in intercultural spaces with diverse audience, and kind of make them actually feel, ironically, given we're worried about overconfidence, young people have told us it makes them feel more confident that they're not going to cause offense, that they can go in there and have a productive conversation. And it also gives them a tool to think, when have I committed the 3 O's, or when have people 3 O'd me? How does that help me interpret some things that have happened to me that didn't feel comfortable? So that's just an example of some things we've done. There are also 5 major curriculum and some other curriculum materials that are all there on the website you can look at. One that I'm really engaged in, and I'm working closely on with a visiting scholar, Everardo Perez Manjares, is to do with history education, kind of going back to my roots. And we've been doing some really interesting work on what happens when we design a curriculum for history and social studies classrooms, but we have young people participating from very different contexts, where why we teach history is not necessarily the same, or what we think even history is, and where there are very different public debates going on about who should be remembered and why, or what even a historical monument could or should be. So I just, Jodie will put in a link, not just to this, but to all our curriculum. And again, we don't want to bombard you, but somebody out there may be interested. So I just thought I'd err on the side of sharing today. And then I just want to say a word about how this connects to previous and ongoing work at Project Zero. Out of Eden Learn did not just happen in a vacuum. I mentioned that Shari Tishman was already interested in slow looking. She has a beautiful book about slow looking. particularly useful for museum or arts educators, but anybody who's interested in how slowing down to observe carefully can really afford us a greater understanding of the world. Here's a book by Carrie about young people and their digital lives. She currently has another book out with our colleague Emily Weinstein, Behind Their Screens, and how young people experience online life and what adults don't know and maybe should know about that. I've put an image here of the Thinking Routine Toolbox, which is a very popular resource on our website. Thinking routines are actually what I call a major export of Project Zero. They're light, nimble structures to help facilitate discussion and thinking in classrooms. We have many, they're awesome, and they totally influenced how we developed the Dialogue Toolkit, which was developed in conjunction with a practicing teacher, Chris Sloan, who had been digging into how we might facilitate productive conversations in classrooms. And then finally, this is a kind of a classic Project Zero book, Teaching for Understanding. You know, this kind of weaves its way through many Project Zero projects, this idea of promoting what some people might call deep learning. You know, why are we teaching young people? What does it look like for them to really understand something? And then, of course, we're in dialogue with scholarship beyond Project Zero. So I just named a few literatures that we read, that we write for, you know, we're in conversation with. That includes global education, online education, intercultural communication, history education, peer-to-peer learning. You know, the list goes on, but just to emphasize, we're not like an echo chamber just referring to our own work. But of course, we're out in the world talking to other scholars and researchers. All right, I'm going to march on to my second strand, and then I really hope we can open this up for conversation. So in parallel, I'm really drawing on my 8 years of being a classroom teacher. I've been involved in projects, and in this case, it's several different projects that really dig into how can we change what's going on in schools, and how can powerful professional learning be a really important agent in making that happen. This work started in 2014. I worked with colleagues Edward Clapp and Andrea Sackdeva on a project called Creating Communities of Innovation. And this involved working with American, British, and Indian curriculum schools in the GEMS network with schools based in the United Arab Emirates. So a very cool and unique opportunity to work cross-culturally in different contexts, albeit within the same city or city-state. That then kind of folds over into a 5-year project in Peru involving the Innova Schools network, a very different network seeking to offer low-cost schooling to kids across Panama. Then, not Panama, sorry, Peru. They're now expanding beyond Peru into Mexico, Ecuador, many places in Latin America with their model. And we had a really unique opportunity to work with them. And then the picture you see there, that was taken last week. I had an amazing trip to Panama with my colleagues Adriana Garcia, Maria Jimena Barrera. We're just getting a new project off the ground, which is about rethinking professional development across Panamanian public schools as part of a bigger effort by their government to revamp schooling in the public sector and how teachers receive professional development. So just to say a little bit more, the first project in the UAE, it led to us developing the concept of inquiry-driven innovation. Our remit initially was to promote innovation in schools, but we quickly saw that what we were doing was being experienced by the teachers, some of whom you see here on the screen, as really powerful professional development. And we came to write about how those two are intertwined. Others have too, but we developed a framework, you know, it's got some principles there about how this can work that really dug into how you can combine promoting innovation, promoting inquiry, and promoting community amongst teachers in a powerful way to promote change on the ground in schools and also to kind of elevate, if you like, teachers' experiences and learning. Geordie is putting in the website link for the book. I'll just note that there's a kind of a whole roadmap that we developed with the teachers who piloted the materials, had feedback into everything that we were doing. And there's kind of a toolkit of 20 tools that can be used, you know, in the slots we suggest or apart, to take people through a cycle of inquiry that promotes innovation. The work we did there kind of overlapped with the work with the Inova schools. That project was called Creating Communities of Inquiry. They were seeking to change their school network, which had already been set up and designed by IDEO, the design company based in California. They had kind of wonderful school buildings in place. They really wanted to promote a different kind of education that was student-based, inquiry-driven, but they really needed help getting teachers to kind of shift their thinking about what they were doing and why, because I'm sure many of you on this Zoom meeting know you can't just snap your fingers and expect teachers overnight to completely change what they think they're doing and why, and to shift their perceptions of what it means to be a teacher. And I'll note in parentheses that I've been through that journey myself. I started my career in a very exam-driven environment in the UK, where I was thought that my students would succeed if I was doing the majority of the work. And I kind of went through a bit of a metamorphosis in a very different environment in Australia, where I had to shift my practice to give young people more voice and more space to do the work themselves in my classrooms, and was frankly astounded at what young people can do, and which frankly I had been preventing them from truly realizing. And so it's very personal for me to try and help teachers imagine what's possible in the classroom, to work more collaboratively, and to really help shift their practices so that they're more engaging and dynamic for young people. That resulted in this very substantial and very nicely illustrated white paper called Deeper Together. It's available in Spanish. On this project, everything's available in Spanish and English, that I invite you to take a look at. And that shows how we adapted some of those ideas so they made sense in the Peruvian context. There are some of our colleagues there. And now, as I said, moving forward, we were invited to work in Panama because we had worked in the Peruvian context. And we're just taking baby steps right now to work out, what do we know? We're coming in with some ideas, but first, what do we understand about the context in Panama, and how can we work with these teachers and school principals and actually district leaders to reimagine professional learning in Panama? And then just to say again, this work came out of nowhere, didn't come out of nowhere. And in some ways, it's a meta project that allowed us to weave in different Project Zero frameworks. These are just some of the previous books and frameworks that influence and continue to influence our work. Slow looking, we've woven in into this project by getting teachers to look slowly at their classrooms and schools as a starting place for reimagining what's possible. Dave Perkins' work has been really influential, as has Ron Richard and Mark Church's work. The Reggio Emilia schools in Italy have been very influential in Project Zero's thinking around documentation and really taking the pulse of what's going on and what young people and teachers are learning to inform the next steps. And then Tina Blythe, who's one of our dear colleagues, she's written extensively about facilitating learning groups, and I have a well-thumbed copy of that as we've been designing powerful professional development sessions for our teachers. I'll also note, of course, there's a lot of scholarship out there and practitioners doing amazing professional development and, you know, adult learning work. We totally tap into that. I'll give a particular shout out to collaborative inquiry, which is very popular in different contexts. And we're very much in dialogue with colleagues around the world who are trying to do similar work. Chile, Canada, Australia, many different parts of the world are trying to do similar work to us. And so, of course, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or claim it as our own, but we're very much in contact with those scholars too. And then I thought I'd just end and open it up for a chat. In my new role, which I only took over in July with my colleague Carrie James, and it's quite daunting and a big honor as we step into very big shoes of the previous directors of Project Zero. I just thought you'd be interested to hear what's on our minds, the future of Project Zero. Geordie will put a link in the chat for an open letter that we recently posted on our website and sent out to our community. And I just thought I'd highlight a few key points from that. I mean, first of all, we're very much planning to build on and maintain some very powerful, long-standing strands of research at Project Zero. I've tried to share a few insights on how the work that I do very much builds on previous work, and that's something we want to continue. At the same time, we are very engaged in ongoing and quite urgent work in terms of diversifying the organization in many different ways. We have kind of an intellectual tradition grounded in cognitive psychology, and some of our earliest work was really focused on what happens in people's minds and brains without a lot of attention to context. I think now we have a lot of projects that are paying very close attention to context, including some of my own. But we want to be continuing to re-examine how we do our research, who are we researching with, who's here at Project Zero, and who are we doing the work for? And like many organizations, this is very serious, urgent, and important work that we are trying to do right now. We are very proud and excited about the work we do with practitioners and for practitioners. We really put an emphasis on what in the past and currently at HGSE is known as usable knowledge, like putting stuff out in the world that teachers, practitioners, educators of all kinds can actually use. So that we intend to carry on with. Project Zero over the years has been quite nimble and evolved in terms of our research interests. Some of that is out of necessity because if we don't keep relevant, people will not fund our work. But we want to carry on adapting to the times and making sure that we're doing new, cutting-edge, socially relevant work. I think you can see in some of the projects I mentioned. I think we very much are doing that. And then finally, post-pandemic, we all went through an experience. We're really seeking to re-energize Project Zero as a really vibrant, globally engaged intellectual community, kind of a unique hub at HGSE and beyond, where research and practice kind of come together and we can have really exciting and relevant conversations. So with that, I will stop talking, stop sharing my screen. And yeah, I'd love to just be in conversation with some of you, answer any questions that you have about either my specific work or Project Zero as an organization.
Wonderful. Liz, thank you so much for the presentation. That was awesome. So we are opening it up to questions now, both in the chat. You're welcome to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Liz, I do want to make sure I address a couple of questions that came in sort of when you started the first strand of the presentation, just to make sure those folks get those questions answered. So first I have a question from Bill O'Reilly. So his question is, how is the current political trajectory for using research into the arts relationship with learning as key to curricula?
Can you just repeat the last bit of that question? Because I'm not sure. Is it the current political climate with regards to arts education? Is that the question, do we think?
Yes, and Bill, feel free to chime in if you want to clarify your question for Liz too.
Yeah, hi Liz, really enjoyed the presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I threw some stuff into the notes. I'm not sure, I sent it to Liz thinking, that you'd hear about it eventually, but I was involved in starting an arts infused school in New York City in 2004. And we quickly became the most successful small learning environment in Brooklyn and maybe even in all of New York in 2004 and 05. But because politically we were under so much scrutiny from the very beginning, no one expected us to do so well. And the political climate also, and that's this question about political trajectory of the political climate, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. And so they ended up firing all of the founders of the best school in Brooklyn. So I mean, that's what I suffered at the hands of the traditional political academic establishment when it came to trying to infuse arts into the curriculum, which worked incredibly well. So that's a lot there, but that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. And is it something that politically are people open to this? The people who fund such programs, are they open to information that you're uncovering?
Great. Well, first of all, I'm really sorry to hear what happened.
Whatever.
So I think there are various ways I might answer this. First of all, if we look over the 55, 56 years of Project Zero's existence, obviously the political landscape has shifted, ups and ebbs and flows during that time. And of course, the work that we do, doesn't exist in a vacuum. We have to be responsive and are affected ourselves by it. There have been times when it's been really difficult to keep Project Zero afloat, and some of that has to do with the political climate about what's popular, what's accessible, etc. I'll also note that one reason that I think that we do a lot of work internationally is there have been times in our existence when the work we were doing was simply not possible or not popular in many US contexts, especially in public schools. So that's just a reality. I would say, and again, arts education isn't really my forte specifically, but I do feel that there are glimmers of hope. I'll note that our colleague here, Joel Mater, who wrote a popular book on deeper learning with Sarah Fine, he found deeper learning was most prevalent kind of on what he calls the periphery of the curriculum. And I think there is, coming out of the pandemic where I think it's obvious there's a mental health crisis. I think the role that the arts can play as we reimagine what's important and what's essential for education, I think it has to be part of that conversation. We do have, funders lurking in the background who are really committed to arts education. I can't say, is it the most lucrative aspect of education? My experience has been it has not. But I would say arts education problems can't be kind of disentangled from the wider political partisanship in the US, for example, and kind of censoring of books, control of curriculum, because arts creates spaces where it's hard to contain exactly what kids are going to do or share, and for that reason can be threatening. And I think all of us are finding our way with what it means to do thoughtful work, that we ourselves are trying to make bridges across political divides, but navigating that terrain and what it means to do work that we believe and are committed to when there are people out there who are trying to shut things down. It's a very waffly answer, but I'm just hearing you and saying, yeah, this is something we have to navigate, and it's real. Yeah.
Right. And another question we got earlier on, Liz, and I think that there might be some similar questions coming in now to this. Is there any opportunity for educators, researchers, and school communities to make connections to and possibly work with the educators and researchers at Project Zero?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there are different ways, shall we say. So the lightest way is that, delving into our website, we really make our resources and tools freely available. So anybody is welcome to try things out. Researchers love to get emails from practitioners. if you've tried something out or want a bit of advice. That's kind of the kind of lowest, well, not the lowest, the easiest entry tier. We also have a few public facing events that you might want to look out for. The second way is we do have professional development offerings. There is a fee attached because it is our funding model. So there are some online courses, online, but also sometimes off campus, and our big kind of 1 week residential program in the summer. That's another way. In terms of getting involved in projects, there, it kind of helps to keep an eye on what's going on. Typically, the model is we do need funding for these, as I explained. And so working with the, for example, in Panama, with that project right now, it's really public school teachers in Panama who have the opportunity to work with us directly. However, those who are interested, and particularly like in Spanish speaking context, can certainly be in touch for us to, kind of find creative ways for you to drop in and be a guest on meetings, that kind of thing. Other projects, which may be more locally based to where some of you are, the Center for Digital Thriving, as they've got things coming up, there may be ways for you to engage and certainly keep abreast of what's going on. And then another obvious way would be keeping your eye on job opportunities. We do have some new projects kind of in the wings emerging, and we do get a lot of applicants, I will say, but keeping your eye out, if you think, wow, this is the kind of place that I would like to work, or it sounds exciting, depending on where you live in the world, since the pandemic, we have become a bit less strict on, hey, you need to live in the surrounding area and be able to come into the office every week. So that, there are opportunities coming up there. But generally speaking, the projects, the way that we're doing our core work, there does have to be an entity of a project funding, and then you kind of have to find a way, if it's possible, to get really involved in the research. That helps. Is there another question, Emily, before we...
Yes. So, Bradford, I see that you posed some really great questions in the chat here. I wonder if you might be willing to unmute and ask Liz these questions, because I feel like you'll do a better job articulating them.
Let's see. The main thing that's been coming up, I just love what you do in terms of creativity in helping us figure out how do people actually truly learn. What are the mechanisms, the happenings, the goings on in the brain, in the community, and in their life that we learn from, and then how do we, given that understanding, help guide some of that learning so that it provides real progress for humanity as a species and as a civilization. I mean, I tend to operate at that sort of grand scale, and I was just wondering what you just were coming up with, all the creative tools and methodologies that PZ is creating. And the challenge, as noted, is the adoption and adaptation of that at the local operational level in communities and school systems, et cetera, in the politics of the community, in the politics and the realities of the civilization in which you're trying to drop it and help it progress. Is there research being done at PZ on that specific issue of how do we increase the adoption and adaptation and making it actually easier and faster and more functional, and to increase the speed and spread of these tools and making the advancement really possible, not just in the tools, but in the actual implication of them and the effect they're having?
Great, that's a wonderful question. So I think several of us are really concerned about that issue. And if we actually think about the history of Project Zero and where we are as an organization, in many ways, we've got a lot of stuff, like a lot of frameworks, a lot of insights, a lot of books. And in some ways, it's a natural, phase of our evolution that we really put our minds to. Okay, we've got some things we know work on a local level. And I guess the two main strands are, number one, like the work that I'm doing, frankly, in Latin America, is how can work that was maybe created in a different context be adapted? That's first of all. So we're not kind of just jetting in off planes and telling everybody how to do the work as if we're, we know everything. How can it be adapted is one, but also how can it spread? And if you want to use the word scaled up, kind of how can we think systemically about how you spread these practices? And, one reason I'm really excited about this, emerging work in Panama is the opportunity to really work with people in the Ministry of Education. They're setting up a new Institute for Teacher Training. How can we seed some of these ideas from the ground up and think system-wide about how they can be spread? Similarly with the Inova schools, they have about 70 plus schools. So it's not a whole education system, but still that's a significant system. Over the years, we had a chance to work ground level classroom teachers, school principals, in the back office with the people who were directing all these schools, the curriculum designers, the coaches who were working across. And I think you'll see in the white paper where you had the link, it really was an opportunity for us to think, how do ideas spread? Because just getting a few isolated people in a system to change is not going to bring about wider spread change. There aren't easy answers, but several of us, Dave Perkins and Flossie Trow notably, they also think about how do you spread change? How do you get traction? And I think it's incredibly important. And I will note, has to be done with some humility again, so that we're not just trying to say we have a one-stop shop, we know how to do it, but to work with teachers and educators to see what's possible. And I'll say to connect with other scholars who also think deeply and have some experiences that we don't have in changing whole school systems. So, I'm very keen on being in touch with scholars who have had decades of experience in that, and us partnering up to see what's possible. But I think your question's really an important one.
Might I do a real quick follow-on?
Mm-hmm.
The creators of TikTok did not have a model for how they were going to spread learning in the world. But in fact, they have been spreading vast quantities of learning in the world. And so the mechanism of going viral within the learning community is very different than trying to figure out how to go viral within the learning structure and organizational structure and systems. And you've got double challenges in a sense. You've got figuring out what actually reaches the end learner first, in addition to what actually reaches the structural members of the learning community and teaching community, the education community, which is a very political, personal, as well as very political, civilization of its own.
No, that's point is well taken. I'll just note the Center for Digital Thriving. I think there we have a great opportunity because that project's looking at digital lives. That's very immersed in, platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, etc. And they have the budget and the wherewithal, the staffing actually, to really think about nifty products that might go viral. They've done work with Common Sense Media. They've got some awesome little videos and products with the aim is to take things viral, to give kids tools to manage their digital life in the very medium that is social media today. And I think more of us at Project Zero, that's where we need to be heading to keep ourselves relevant and part of the conversation. So thank you. I'm looking to you, Lisa, to throw to manage this.
We did get another question from Claudia. So she said, can you say a little more about where the Good Project is now and what direction is it taking?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. And I would point people to the Good Project website, which is very dynamic, has a blog, and there are multiple strands. One that I will highlight is that they're really putting an emphasis on developing curriculum and resources for schools, and thinking about how can we create some of the dispositions and thinking and kind of frameworks that will really help young people early on in their lives consider what is good work, what does it mean to work ethically or be an ethical person. There's a lot of energy around that. There's also within that group, and it's kind of There are multiple researchers working loosely within that core. They're also doing really interesting intercultural work or work in multiple contexts. And I'll also note that Howard Gardner, our dear colleague, he with Wendy Fishman recently had a book out looking at the state of liberal arts in higher education, and they've also got follow-on work, practical work in higher education, working with undergraduates. And if you see, that's like the natural evolution of some of this work, theoretically defining a concept, really looking at what it means and can mean in different domains. And then they're now onto the so what and what should we do next, really taking action. So Howard's not here to speak, but probably would do a much more eloquent job. But that in broad brushstrokes is what the good project team is up to, and they're doing like very important work. Thank you, Geordie. Geordie's put in some links there so you can investigate. I'll also note, and actually, Indy, thank you. Indy's one of our beloved facilitators at the Project Zero classroom, and a key member of our extended Project Zero community. We do have like hotspots for professional development, more grassroots. DC is one area. I think there's also a lot of stuff happening in Pittsburgh right now. I think there's emerging stuff happening in Houston, maybe in the Bay Area. We've got got flashpoints, where you could connect with other educators who've been using Project Zero ideas for a long time. Indy, I don't know if you want to add on, as I feel like you're very in touch with those communities.
I'll just say that there is exciting development for over a decade with the Alameda County Office of Education and an integrated learning specialist program, but also unfortunately echoing William's comments and your comments earlier, Liz, about the fluctuating nature of politics within these public education institutions. The department was dissolved, even though it had been a part of Qualities of Quality research, the Maker Education Agency by Design research, amongst other Project Zero initiatives. So yeah, I think that I'm not sure if those communities are on Project Zero's website. So that's something and maybe Jordy can email about or send a message about that. But it'd be great to based on this interest, it'd be great to see that visible or ways to help connect people more locally.
Great. I see we're at the top of the hour. I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes if people wanted to connect, but I just really encourage any of you who, if there's anything that I've said today, we've discussed today that's exciting, don't hesitate to reach out. The Project Zero website has the contact information of our principal investigators. There are 15 of them. It's also important to know we have very senior researchers who are doing amazing work, who, you contact them as well. We really have people who are eager to engage with practitioners. Feel free to contact me, and we'd be happy to follow up with any of your interests as they emerge.
Great, Liz, thank you so much. This is truly wonderful. We really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise and all the amazing things that both you and Project Zero are working on. I did just want to note very quickly before we log off, as I mentioned before, there will be a follow-up email going out next week that will have the event recording, as well as all of the fantastic resources that were shared throughout the session today. There will be contact information in that email as well, so please look out for that. And again, Liz, thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.